All right, so it's 7 o'clock, so we're going to call the meeting to order. I just wanted to make a quick note for council's benefit that we are just going to reorganize under other business. We're going to deal with the budget and also the low income tax exemption policy as items 1 and 2, and then we will handle the rest of other business. Is there any additions? So other than amending the order, I would ask for a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Moved.
We have a seconder?
Seconded.
Thank you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded, the agenda is approved with one reordering. Okay, so our next agenda item is gallery presentations. So I'd like to invite Stephen Long up to the podium. He's going to do a presentation for us this evening. Welcome to council, Stephen.
How you doing?
Good.
Hey, good evening, and thank you for your time. Before I begin, I'd like to thank my father, Sergeant Emerson Long, a D-Day veteran, and all D-Day veterans on this day. I'd also like to thank the Strait Area Museum for use of their photos in my presentation. And I'll begin. I'm not a public speaker, so I do get a little nervous, but I'm here this evening to introduce you to my grandfather, Austin Wiley Labers Letcher. He was born to William and Eliza Letcher of Spring Hill, Nova Scotia on June 12, 1905. He'd be 118 years old this month. The last of 11 children, he would lose his father in 1912 at the age of 7 to a mining accident. Fortunately, he had a loving, strong mother and 10 older siblings and was well cared for. Some years after his father's death, his mother would marry widower Arthur Dixon of Port Hawkesbury. On Arthur's passing, my grandfather, at the age of 21, would move to Port Hawkesbury to care for his mother. He would make Port Hawkesbury his forever home. His brother Arthur was living and working in Inverness. On a visit in 1926, he was introduced to Darlene Dot Patterson of Sydney Mines at a church service. As it turned out, they were a perfect match for each other. They were married in 1928 and raised a family of 7 in Port Hawkesbury. The family included my mother Norma, my aunts Lydia, Frances, Dorothy, Anne, Anne, and Shirley, and my uncle Austin Letcher Jr. The Letcher family now counts 7 generations in the Strait area and growing. My grandfather spent This is the second house there is where my grandfather, the second house on top is where my grandfather's home was on Granville Street. Below in the car was my grandfather, my grandmother in front of that home on Granville Street. The one beside that, dancing in the living room, is the house that was built on Sydney Road after that house burned in 1963, I believe. On the right is my grandmother and my grandfather at an Eastern Star meeting with another matriarch, Audrey Reynolds. Some people may remember Audrey. My grandfather was a game warden. Back then they called them forest rangers. He was a forest ranger from 1947 to 1967. In the 50s and 60s, Inverness County had a large deer population, and that drew hunters from Halifax and all points east. The Department of Lands and Forests' main concern at that time was fighting forest fires and enforcement. In 1945, he was hired as a forest ranger for Inverness County by Alistair Fraser. Alistair was the first provincially employed forester on Cape Breton Island. When Alistair was asked about the days of the department and his wardens, Austin Letcher stood out to him. According to Alistair, Letcher was one of the best in the province, adding, as far as I know, Austin Letcher was the first game warden in Nova Scotia to use parachute flares for wildlife enforcement. Innovative at the time, flares were very effective for lighting up fields to locate poachers. The fall of 1967 brought reports of bright lights in the sky, gunshots in the air around the River Dennis area. On the evening of October 7, 1967, my grandfather set out to investigate these reports. He would never return home. In the early morning hours of October 8, 1967, there was an accident just outside Port Hastings. I learned recently that A.D. McDonald and a friend were the first on the scene that night. They found my grandfather unconscious, but alive inside the overturned vehicle. The nearest place to call for help was a phone booth in Port Hastings. A.D. raced there, made the call, returned to the accident scene and my grandfather. Help arrived and my grandfather was removed from the vehicle and transported to St. Martha's Hospital, where he succumbed to his injuries shortly thereafter. An investigation was conducted that led to evidence of foul play and subsequently the death of my grandfather. Unfortunately, the investigation did not result in any arrest or charges. In the department's history to date, only 3 conservation officers have lost their lives in the service to the province of Nova Scotia. They included A. Harrison Eisenhower, Austin W.L. Letcher, and Donald C. Wood. On September 19th, a monument was unveiled, you see it there, commemorating the lives of these 3 fallen officers. It was part of the department's first open house at the Shubenacadie Provincial Wildlife Park. It's a monument to my grandfather and the other two gentlemen. You can also find, his name is also amongst those at the Fallen Peace Officers Monument, located his name is also amongst those on the Fallen Peace Officers Monument located in the Grand Parade Square in Halifax, Nova Scotia. He's also on the Canadian Police and Peace Officers Monument in Ottawa, Canada, a monument dedicated to the memory of police and peace officers killed in the performance of their duties. This evening, you've learned a little bit of the personal life of my grandfather and the tragic events of October 8, 1967 that led to his death. The game warden, Austin Letcher Sr., was known to be a professional, no-nonsense man, fair in his dispatching of his duties. The man, Austin Letcher Sr., was one of honor, kind, caring, compassionate, and dedicated to his work and family. I spoke with my Aunt Shirley about what I was going to do tonight, and she said, being a forest ranger was so much more than a job to him. It was his life. Ironic, really, given fate. I'm here to make a request of council, a substantial request, befitting my grandfather's sacrifice. I'm here this evening asking council to rename the Port Hawkesbury Community Trails to the Austin Letcher Senior Memorial Hiking Trails. I can think of nothing more fitting or dignifying for our beautiful community trails than to be renamed in honor of my grandfather, Game Warden Austin Letcher Sr., a man of our community, a man who gave his life in the line of duty, protecting the forest and wildlife of the area. You can see the forest animals standing behind him. And then when asked if they support the renaming of the trails, they all agreed 100%. Yes. For myself and the Letcher and Long families, I would like to thank the mayor and council members for the opportunity to make this request for my grandfather, Game Warden Austin Letcher Sr. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen, very much for your presentation. I guess I would ask council if they have any questions or comments, but before I do, usually when we get a request, and this certainly is a significant request, and we do appreciate your presentation, we'll need to take some time to consider it. And of course, first and foremost, the trails are overseen by the Strait Area Trails Association as well. So we'd be remiss to make a decision, of course, without consulting them as well with regard to your request. So with that, I guess we'll start with Councilman or Deputy Mayor McDougall.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Steve, for your presentation. And I didn't know Austin personally. I was very young. I remember he used to be, I don't know if you mentioned, the town cop in the town also.
My uncle.
Oh, was your uncle, was it? Well, anyway, Dad used to be friends with your father, and they hung around together when they were growing up, and they knew each other, and they had lots of conversations with your father also, mostly about the war and the old times and stuff like that. So I just want to mention that. Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. You, Councilor McCrory.
Yes, Mayor, through you to Steve. Steve, thank you very much for the presentation. Interesting to know the history of your grandfather, and appreciate the request that you're bringing forward. And as the mayor said, we will deal with it on a go-forward basis and in consultation with the Straight Area Trails group as well. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Councilor Plain.
Through you, Your Worship, Stephen, thank you for the presentation. Very informative. It's a bit of a history lesson, which is good. We usually get at least one per council meeting anyway. One thing I will point out is right now, I don't believe we even have a policy in place for renaming trails or properties in the town, not that I'm aware of. So that's something that we would have to consider, unless I'm wrong, Councillor or Deputy
We
Mayor.
need another history lesson. Do we have it?
Well, no, we don't have a policy, but it's not, we've done it before. We've done it for the Roxbury Arena. We changed that to the Memorial Arena, it's called now. So it has been done in the past, and I'm sure I can think of some more where it's been done also. What? Danbury Ball Field, we did it. And the Oakley Ball Field, we did it. There's different places we did it through the town, yeah.
Okay.
Councilor MacGyver.
Thank you, Steve, for the presentation. I knew a lot of the history of your grandfather, as your parents were, I guess, neighbors of my grandparents. But as the mayor stated, we don't usually make decisions at these meetings like that. And I certainly look forward to having the meeting to go over everything and make a decision. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. And I guess, Terry, did you want to comment on having a naming policy or what that might look like for us?
Sure. So we get, most municipalities do have policies around naming. Most municipalities, universities, school boards, those types of things. So that is something I can bring forward. I can bring forward some examples of naming policies and how that procedure would typically work in a municipality. If it's the wish of council, I can bring some things forward actually prior to committee of whole, and we can decide when to review that when you wish.
Yeah. Really enjoyed your presentation. Would you mind sharing that with us? It's a great history on there. Yeah.
Melissa has it.
Do we
Yeah,
have?
go ahead. She has it.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Melissa, will you share that? And I mean, and I think really, regardless, I think it would be a nice story for us to maybe share on social media as well, just to kind of get the information.
I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking how this could tie in. I mean, this could really present the trails in such a way that media would cover this. I've been talking to Ian. Ian is willing to come here. The minister is ready to come here. I'm sure the premier will come here. I'm sure I could get somebody federally, but there's opportunity to promote our trail.
Yep, but definitely the history behind your grandfather, I think, is something that would be important to share with the community.
Just a question,
Yeah,
Your Worship, through
absolutely.
you.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm just wondering, Steve, but there's a lot of trails down there that go. Would it be good to name one of the trails? Because there's one, I think it goes in, like it goes into the mill trail, the old mill, it connects into that, out the road and that also, right?
I mean, if we had to do something different than what I proposed here, then yes, we could do that. But I would, at that point, perhaps we could make a dedication of the trail system,
Yeah, maybe something, yeah.
right? name a trail passage if they don't want. I understand the Strait Area Association looks after it.
Mhm.
And from the sign I see down there is the Port Hawkesbury Community Trails, right?
Yes.
So I don't think it interferes with the Strait Area Association and their management of it. Like, they don't have to change their letterhead or anything like that.
I'm just thinking like with the deputy mayor's suggestion, if there were a new trail developed and dedicated to Austin Letcher, I'm just thinking the trailhead could be like a commemoration of his history.
Down Reeve Street,
Well, wherever the trail, wherever that trail.
I could envision like down by the ball field there, going into the old, we used to go into, we used to call it Mill Brook there, down around where the old falls were, and up and around there or something big. But then there's another trail that goes to the school, and there's another one that goes out past Wayne Reynolds Way. It hooks on to the,
I think it's a lot of traffic.
to the Stora Trail, the old Stora one, that Stora had made at one time.
yeah, I don't have a problem with naming a trail after him.
Yeah.
Again, I would like to see some sort of dedication, maybe a plaque placed somewhere.
So maybe if you're open to it, we can definitely bring all of the ideas, your presentation to the Strait Area Trails Association, let them digest it, and maybe they can come up with some ideas they might have too. And maybe at some future time when we do have a little bit more of an idea, we can maybe have a second, like a meeting, just to kind of review, maybe just yourself and maybe a designate from council, maybe some designates from the Strait Area Trail Society, and just have a conversation about the realm of possibility.
Sure. It's 56 years since my grandfather was killed.
Wow.
I mean, it's time, folks.
I really appreciate you coming, taking the time, and you say that you aren't a public speaker, but I think you did a damn fine job.
I can read.
Well, not all of us can read.
I have big letters.
Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, guys,
Fantastic job.
If you have
Thank
any
you.
questions in the meanwhile, you can get a hold of myself or Terry. You know how to get a hold of me.
The first part of that, I'll send you that it's not on the slides.
Okay.
I'll send you the
Appreciate it.
text for it. You can
Here.
add it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Stephen.
Thanks,
Okay, guys,
David.
thank you very much.
Take care.
Yeah.
So the next agenda item is acknowledgements, and I do want to open up for council acknowledgements as well, but I do have a few that I'd like to share this evening. First and foremost, of course, June is always the month of graduations, so definitely on behalf of council, would like to congratulate the NSCC and Strait Area Education Recreation Center students who will be graduating later this month. Definitely congratulations on all of our behalfs. Of course, you'll all notice that the progress flag is flying on our 4th flagpole to celebrate Pride Month for the month of June. And I also wanted to also mention, you're all familiar with Taylor Linloff, and she likes to help us out every June with regard to Pride Month activities. So she is they are planning a Pride Walk for June 10th at 1 p.m. And if anybody would like to join on behalf of council, definitely feel free. Taylor's working really hard on that event, and the town will be assisting and supporting Taylor with regard to that event. And also I wanted to hand things over to Huey for a moment, because I know the Festival of the Strait is also working on celebrating Pride as well, and some of the events they're doing.
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. And we're having a Pride/inclusive festival parade. Taylor's involved with that somewhat. She wants to step back on that one a little bit. And there's another group that we're going to have a Pride thing at the end of the month there, but they may not have it at the festival because they want to get it into Pride Month, but they're thinking of having it on July 2nd. So
Youth Project?
the youth project, and they were talking about having it at the fire hall, but I think they're going to move to the waterfront, but it's still in the making, but it's all good.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you.
And of course, for all you fathers out there, Father's Day on June 19th. And of course, June 21st, we want to acknowledge National Indigenous Peoples Day. And on June 17th, we will be raising the Filipino flag to celebrate Filipino History and Heritage Month. And anybody else would like to make any acknowledgements?
Yes, Your Worship.
Sure.
Through you. I'd like to acknowledge the students at SARIC last week who received their academic awards. It was a large number of students. What really impressed me is that a majority of the students got the silver and the gold. It was a really good turnout, well attended, and just a congratulations to all the students.
Absolutely. Yeah, we got a lot of smart cookies. That's Eric for sure. Okay, so we'll move on from acknowledgements and we'll look at the approval of council minutes. So the first,
Your Worship's point of order.
Okay.
Will we be changing up the process?
just,
There?
yeah, we're going to, under other business, we're going to.
Wait that long?
Well, we can, if council's okay with
Yeah,
it, we can.
no, I thought we
can
were gonna do it,
budget now.
I thought we were gonna do it, yeah.
We can do those two items.
I have no problem with,
If-
no, it's all good. You can
It's
do
just,
your
if
business.
it's unanimous, then we can absolutely accommodate an earlier exit
honestly,
for you.
Yeah, unanimous. It's unanimous.
Okay,
Yeah,
go
let's
ahead,
yeah.
Aaron. So we will be, just hold on 1 second, sorry. So we're going to be doing other business. We're going to do our budget first, or actually, let's do the low income first, and then we'll do budget second. And I apologize, everybody, for my random coughing. I'm a little bit under the weather today.
Really.
We're going to get through this. Aaron.
Okay.
Thank you.
There's a reward at the end. You get to leave early.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just wanted to review the low income tax exemption policy. We've had a number of chances to discuss this policy and to review council. And council have had copies of the policy and the updates to the policy. So just to give some context around the amendments, the last time we looked at this was in October of 2019. We provided notice to council that we were reviewing the low income tax exemption policy on May 12th of 2023. And based on discussions with council, the intention is, and what's in your draft policy that we're looking to approve this evening, is an increase in the exemption from $200 to $350 per assessment. Based on a jurisdictional review, this is more than the average exemption that we've seen. So yeah, it's a 75% increase to that exemption for those that can use it. The income threshold does remain the same at $24,000, and this is household and it's taxable income, not gross. So there's certain incomes that are deducted from your gross income to determine your taxable income. So a number of the individuals that apply have higher income than that, but their taxable income is below the threshold of 24,000. Just a couple other items. The applicants, and this is consistent with our previous policy, but applicants, just for information, must own and occupy the residence on the application. They can't be renting the residence. It has to be, you have to own and occupy. Application deadline is July 15th for that to come in, and that's in advance of our final tax bill for the year. We do require notice of assessments from the previous year in order to verify your income, and those have been provided. And just for information, the treasurer's decisions on the applications are final, and we don't typically have any issues with that. So I know council have had some chances to review the policy, but happy to answer any questions on that policy right now, if council has any. And if not, we'll be looking for a motion to adopt the amendments to the policy as presented.
Thank you, Aaron. Any questions for Aaron at this time? So which is council?
I'd move to adopt the policy.
Okay, so we currently have a motion on the floor for consideration of council, and the motion is about to appear on the screen.
No, it's not. It's just
Is
a
that-
motion to adopt the amendments to the low
Okay,
income tax
perfect.
exemption policy as presented.
Perfect, thank you.
Sorry.
Any discussion or comments for the motion?
Just
Okay.
a
Over to you, Deputy Mayor.
question, maybe Aaron might know or might not know it. Do we know how many people this will affect?
We usually get probably 20 to 25 applications. This, I mean, that's at the $200, I guess it would likely be around the same this year.
Good, thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Question has been called. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded, the motion is approved. And now we're going to move on to our 2024 municipal budget.
Your worship, I wonder if we're doing the budget and then, I'm not sure, is Ms. McEachran leaving after the budget? So the other item that is on the agenda is number 4, is the notice of travel expense policy amendments.
Okay,
And I wonder if.
thank you for that catch. Maybe Aaron, if you can speak to that before you leave as well.
Okay, I didn't realize my name was on that one, sorry. So it's just a notice of policy review for the travel policy. So we're gonna look at the allowances within the travel policy. It hasn't been amended for quite some time, and in particular, fuel prices have increased significantly. And I think primarily looking to mirror the provincial rates in that travel policy, and then we don't have to bring it back when fuel prices change. That's changed annually with the province.
That sounds great. So it's just a notice
It's just
to
notice,
council.
yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, on to budget. Thank you, Blaine.
All right, thank you, your worship. 2023-24 municipal budget. So just, we always discuss this, and I'll go through this as quickly as I can, give it amount of time. So what's really positive within the town of Roxbury, and I think within nationally, we've been seeing assessment increases. This is something that most municipalities are used to seeing, assessment increases. However, if you look at the trending of our residential assessments, they've been pretty stagnant for quite some time. But we had seen an increase in 2023 last year's budget, and as well we're seeing an increase this year. So 8.8% increase in our residential assessment over last year. We're still low in comparison to the other municipalities in Cape Breton, but that growth is significant for us. But when we compare that to 2014, it's a kind of a staple year that we always continue to compare back to. Over that 10-year period, we've only increased 15%. So on average, our assessments have increased 1.5% a year over the last 10 years. But that growth has primarily happened in the last 2. And commercial assessments have grown as well, which is a consistent trend nationally. We've been having declining commercial assessments over time. We have increased 7% over last year, but in comparison to 2014, which is the same year we used as our kind of our comparison year, we're still down 1%, but we're getting there. We're getting back to our 2014 assessment levels. So just high level picture here, graph of the town of Port Hawkesbury revenues. The budget that is draft 3 actually, based on numerous workshops and conversations with council and staff throughout the last few months. We've ended up with an $8.47 million budget. And as you can see, the largest component of our budget is assessable property taxes. So that's residential, commercial, and resource taxes. Followed by 10% grants in lieu, which are grants that we get from provincial and federally owned properties. Some other smaller amounts, sales of service, that would be our civic center, our aquatics facilities, our services that we sell to others. And we do show transfers from reserves of 0%. That's just because it's a really, really small percent. Last year, we had to transfer $156,000 from our reserve to balance. Because we had the growth in assessment this year, we were able to reduce that to just under $9,000 this year. So very minimal transfer from reserves this year, which is nice to see. Expenditures, it's a balanced budget that is presented to you this evening, $8.47 million in expenditures. The largest portion of our expenditures relates to protective services, being fire and policing the larger amount. We were able to provide a bit more money to our fire services this year for required equipment, which was nice to be able to add. And our policing costs did also increase by about $40,000. So there was some pressure there around protective services and increases. The next piece of the pie is general government services, which is all the administration and council expenses. All our grants to organizations and exemptions of taxes, that falls into that category. The Civic Center at 13%, and that's the expenses only. There would be offsetting revenues that would offset that. And the next largest portion would be our transportation and public works, which is all of our roads and streets and sidewalks and all of the works that our public works department provides. Yeah, any questions on the charts, revenues or expenses before we move on? Just to kind of show you our tax rates within this budget are remaining the same. That's a $1.58 residential rate, a $4.16 commercial rate, and a 22-cent sewer service charge, which provides us $5.6 million in tax revenue. So yeah, rates remain unchanged, and there's been a lot of hard work put in by both council and staff on trying to maintain that rates to signal the openness for development here in the town of Port Hawkesbury, while creating a community that folks want to live in and do business in. So I think that's a positive thing for council and for ourselves. I'm going to continue to say this until we change it. So the town of Port Hawkesbury's tax rate at $1.80, well, it's not even $1.80, $1.58, but combined it's $1.80 is the same as it was in 1987. Yeah. So that was on the operating side of things, but we'll talk a bit about capital and provide some highlights on the capital budget. So previously we had approved, which is primarily our ICIP projects, $6.6 million in projects. We've added $2.2 million in new projects this year. So we have an $8.8 million capital plan. Of that, $3.3 million is coming from our reserves. This shows, just for a comparison, we look at the net capital assets. So that's the net book value. So it's the cost of our assets less the depreciation, so the use of those assets over time. And so this capital plan is 26% of our net capital assets. So you can kind of consider that you're replacing that percentage of your capital. Positively, I think too, we like to look at the leveraging opportunities that we've taken advantage of. So these projects, $8.8 million of projects are leveraged at 62%, which is a good number. Just some highlights. Water transmission and distribution. We have an ICIP approved project for that. It's $3.37 million. Work has started already. You can see part of that was the Tamarack, removal of the Tamarack water tank. Replacement of the Pitt Street tank is upcoming. There's work to pressure reducing valves, to around meters, around the treatment facility. So there's numerous projects within that scope of work, which we're really excited to have federal and provincial funding for and be able to move forward with to maintain the quality in our water system. Streets and sidewalks, so we're continuing to have aggressive patching like we have in previous years. As well, we're looking at replacing 1,300 meters of sidewalk this year. Around fleet, the wheel loader is set to be replaced this year. Aging piece of equipment, higher cost of repairs, and it's time for that to be replaced. The Civic Center, there's some technology upgrades that will be occurring, as well as generator installation in looking at moving towards a comfort center in the Port Hawkesbury Civic Center. Facilities, obviously, the Public Works facility is requiring a rebuild due to fire. which is a major project that will be occurring this year, as well as some outdoor accessibility improvements around pathways in some of our outdoor spaces. And the outdoor accessibility, Terry, I think we'll talk about that later, but there is some funding that will offset those costs. Continuing with our active transportation project, so connectivity improvements and placemaking focused on the waterfront in Eastern Town this year. Additional connections along the waterfront and reefs in the next 2 years. It's a $3 million project total over a 5-year period. Waterfront, so Sunset Park, there's going to be some completion, art installation, and signage in that area and at other areas along the waterfront, as well as installation of kiosks along the waterfront. And we've had some ACOA and provincial funding to help with those projects. That was my highlights of both the capital and operating, and happy to answer any questions from council should they have them now.
Thank you, Erin. So we'll open up the floor for questions or comments. We'll start with Councillor McIver.
No, Your Worship, I don't have any questions.
Councillor Coyne.
No questions.
Councillor. Sorry, Councillor McCord.
No questions, Your Worship.
Deputy Mayor.
Well, no questions.
Did you get the side-eye from Erin?
I think it
I
is.
feel like for the next,
You feel
the
free to
next
ask
budget
questions.
meeting, if
Big
we
meeting.
have that like tagline, same taxes
Question
from 1987 or 1987, I feel like we need to like
You know, there's
do our bangs like they did in 1987.
There's one thing I would like to mention,
Sure.
Your Worship, and it's just down in our, and you had mentioned it, that we had discussed it before, that different municipalities do the taxes rates and collect taxes in different ways than we do. And a lot of them, their tax rate might be a lot lower, but they're not, their water and their fire services and sewer services and that are all separate. Ours is inclusive, so that makes our tax rate look higher in the province, which it's usually around in the middle of the pack anyway, but I think it would be a lot lower if we did it the way a lot of other municipalities in the province did.
And typically you'll see that a lot in rural municipalities too, where a lot more costs are broken out of the general tax rate. We did do it by breaking out our sewer rate, just to look a bit more comparable, but you're right, fire rate and local improvement charges, so sidewalk charges, that sort of thing, or even sometimes streetlights and garbage can be tacked on top of the general rate. So really it's not apples to apples comparing tax rate when you're looking at one municipality versus another. You really have to understand what's included in that rate when you're comparing one to another. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, and the average citizen might not.
Yeah.
They might see our rate is just higher without kind of looking deeper.
Yeah.
Okay, so council, before you, we do have a motion for consideration. Would somebody like to make this motion?
I'll move it.
Okay. So if you move it, you have to read it.
Absolutely nothing.
Okay.
So the motion, so I can do that. So if you're in agreement with what's been put forward and the work that we've done over the last couple of months or 2-3 months, that the town of Roxbury approves the operating and capital budgets as presented June 6, 2023, with a residential tax rate set at $1.58 per $100 of assessment and a commercial tax rate set at $4.16 per $100 of assessment, and a sewer service charge of 22 cents per $100 of assessment for the fiscal year 2023-24. Property taxes are payable as billed June 1st, 2023 and October 1st, 2023, and interest will be charged at a rate of 18% per annum on overdue accounts.
Okay, thank you, Erin. So we have a mover. Do we have a seconder?
Seconded.
Thank you.
Can you read it?
It kind of started like I was counting down on the Jeopardy.
Yeah.
Okay, so we do have a mover and a seconder. Any discussion on the motion?
Question.
The question has been called. All those in favor, please signify by saying
Aye.
aye. Contrary minded? Okay, the motion is approved and our budget is set. So
That's unanimous?
unanimously passed. So I just wanted to congratulate Erin and Terry and all of our town staff. Budgets are a lot of work, and also to congratulate council because it's a lot of meetings as well on our behalf. So.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron.
And I guess, Aaron, so your part of the agenda is completed, so thank you so much and have a safe journey home.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's pretty easy.
So we are going to go back to agenda item 6, which is approval of the minutes. I would call for any errors or omissions for a public meeting of council from May 2nd, 2023. Okay, so hearing no errors or omissions, I would ask if there's any business arising from the minutes. And I just have like one quick question. I know that council did make a motion to approve the raising of the Filipino flag, but my question is, do we have that flag raising already ratified in our list of flag raising that we approved in last fall?
Yeah, I can't be certain, Mark.
Okay.
I was thinking of the same thing, and I'm not.
So
certain.
maybe we'll
It is included, so Melissa prepared that list. and
Maybe
did it
we'll
for you.
double check it, because then that way we wouldn't have to worry about doing it next year. So it's already-
Yeah, so as Terry's just said, Melissa's indicating,
Oh,
it is on the list, yeah.
perfect. I mean,
Good.
it doesn't hurt to be extra
Yeah.
careful, but no, I just wanted to, I wasn't 100% sure.
Good point.
Anything else arising from the minutes? So we'll move now to council committee reports. Over to you, Terry.
Yes, your worship, just a couple of items coming from committee of whole. We had a great presentation on an art convention, and there has been communication with Donnie Boudreau and some of the staff. But we really want to sit down and go through what's involved, ensure we can adequately support the program, and then come back with a recommendation of council at committee of whole. And and that's what we've passed on.
Perfect. So what is the wishes of council?
I move the motion.
Okay, do we have a seconder?
Seconded.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded? Motion is approved.
From committee of whole, for your consideration, that the town of Hawkesbury sent a letter of thanks to Rolf Bowman for his donations and support for the,
Now we only,
thank you, Friendship Gala fundraiser.
I'd make that motion, your worship.
thank you, councillor. Do we have a seconder?
Second, your worship.
Seconded by the deputy mayor. Any discussion?
Question.
Question has been called. All those in favor, please signify by saying
Aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded? The motion is approved.
So those are the items coming from committee of whole.
Okay, thank you so much, Terry. At this time, I would ask if there are any errors or omissions. And if there are no errors or omissions, I would ask for a motion to approve the committee of the whole minutes of May 16th, 2023.
Moved.
Seconded.
Okay, any discussion?
Question.
Question has been called. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded? Okay, the meeting minutes are approved. I would ask at this time if there's any business arising from the committee of the whole meeting minutes. Okay, I will note that I was able to get more information with regard to Bill 225 from the Department of Municipal Affairs and Housing. So I will share that with Melissa so she can add that to our committee of the whole package for later in the month. I just wanted to, pardon me, I just wanted to give you that for information. Oh, and the other question that I had is, I did ask council at our last committee of the whole if you wanted me to do a presentation on Win Europe or if the report wasn't up. So
Report's good.
Report's good.
they're perfect. Okay.
Thank you.
I did want to make that offer since I did offer it, and just to make sure that I didn't want to
I'm just sad that you
leave
didn't
it
get to,
open-ended.
I'm just sad that you didn't get to go out and see the mermaid.
I didn't get to see the mermaid. I heard that the mermaid was defaced, sadly, but I don't know if that's true or not. Okay, so we'll move on then to motions from in camera. I don't believe, Terry, we have any motions at this time.
No.
We don't have any correspondence or proclamations at this time. We do have some items under other business.
Your worship, there is one letter that we included under
apologies.
correspondence.
Sorry about that.
So it's a letter from Communities Culture, Tourism, Heritage, Office of the Minister, and it's an announcement of I'm not certain that we included this in your package.
Oh, okay.
It really came out, we
Like
actually
hot off
received
the
it.
press.
This is Gordy?
Yeah, it was too Gordy,
Yeah.
and this wouldn't necessarily something that we would include. But it's an announcement of a project. So it's funding in the amount of $37,666.67. Which is exactly half of the project cost of $75,000. So anyway, so that's going to go a long way in providing increased accessibility in Granville Green, our playground park, and Sunset Park, small.
I don't know, folks. We like those kind of letters, don't we?
Yep.
Yeah, keep them coming, Terry. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for that. So Terry, I guess back over to you for council expenses.
Yes, we just have to have someone join us here, so.
It's got a very fancy presentation.
She's really up her game. She upped her game.
We liked
over
it so
here.
much, we went through it all over again, Aaron. There we go.
So, May was a busy month for training, and so we had FCM, we had NSFM Spring Conference, and so a fair amount of travel in an otherwise light year. So, total expenditure of $9,000 for counselors and CAO, which is of course posted on our website for public to view.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Terry. Summer recess is the next item.
Yes, your worship. So we every year we've asked council to consider a summer recess, and the motion that we'd ask for consideration is that the town of Port Hawkesbury recess for the months of July and August for regular public council meetings and committee of whole meetings, and we'll call special public meetings as required.
That's, S shouldn't be there, right?
Yeah,
Yes,
it
that's to
belongs on
move
the end
over,
of
yeah.
the meetings.
Yeah.
But we could interpret
Same.
that as if we have to have a special meeting, we do it on the beach.
We could, I was thinking the same thing, the same, yeah.
I mean, I feel like we could totally like read into it that way.
No, you're right.
What's the wishes of council?
I would move that we recess for the 2 months, July and August, for regular public council meetings and committee of the whole meetings. And we'll call special meetings as required.
Hopefully understand. Okay, do we have a seconder?
Second.
All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded. Okay, we will recess. You talked us into it, Terry. So we've already covered our low income tax exemption as well as our notice of travel expense policy amendments. Do we have Taylor with us for there's a Tyler.
Tyler's on right now.
Hi, Tyler.
I'm here. Hi, how are you?
Welcome. So
Thank you,
Tyler's
Your
going to talk about our offshore wind knowledge exchange delegation information invitation to go to Germany. Over to you, Tyler.
Yeah, so thank you, Mayor and Council, for having us. I'm joined with Martin Thompson, the Innovation and Economic Development Officer for the town of Port Hawkesbury. So I'm going to just briefly introduce this opportunity. And you've come off the report from Mayor Brenda in Copenhagen, and I know if you're like me, it's great to have another opportunity and to be invited by some of our European friends. And so briefly, I'm just going to give a brief overview of why we see this, and then Martin's going to go into some of the specifics of why we see value in this opportunity package we were given. Again, just building off the interest that the German government in particular has had in Atlantic Canada, and as many of you probably read in the news, the German Chancellor meeting with Prime Minister Trudeau and recently in Newfoundland and elsewhere in Canada, and really, so we have a real relationship here as Canada and Germany on this. We've been invited by the Energy Partnership and the government there in Germany to be part of this, and they're covering a good portion of this cost of this trip as they see this relationship as valuable. So, back of the napkin, we see that as about a third of the cost being covered by our hosts and expecting us to cover some of the cost to go. We look forward to being there with our partners in Net Zero Atlantic, who we're working on a survey that you may have seen on social media right now in our work with the regional assessment and of course the support that we've had through the Offshore Wind Task Force, of which the mayor is one of the co-chairs. And so, the province of Nova Scotia really also wants a collaborative effort here. We've talked to our colleagues and they see it as valuable. We see learning from the experience of German communities as how they've taken the opportunity that offshore wind and green fuel development has had in their communities and ensure that we learn the good things that they did. We learn as much about perhaps some of the mistakes they made, continue to grow those relationships. And so I think I probably said this last time we chatted, we rarely go on trips like this, but yet again, here we find ourselves here. We always go with partners. So in this case, we have staunch partners that not only invited us, but are willing to pay some of the fee to come to Germany, partners who are attending in terms of Net Zero Atlantic and others, and partners, we hope, with the town of Port Hawkesbury and Richmond County, so we can stretch our dollars that we use with the Regional Enterprise Network. But for the specifics on what we see in this agenda is valuable, I'll turn it over to Martin.
Thank you very much, Tyler, and thank you very much, Council. Good evening. Thanks for letting me speak here. Can I just check that everybody can hear me okay? Yeah, perfect.
Right.
I think I've had some issues with my headset today, but no, that's great. Okay, so I think it might be helpful just to juxtaposition this a little bit with the Wind Europe 2023 conference in Copenhagen. Seeing you've read the report, I think the Wind Europe event was very much, yes, about learning from Europe, but it was also very much about making connections, very much about promoting Nova Scotia, promoting Cape Breton, promoting the Strait of Canso and the town of Port Hawkesbury in particular. This trip here probably leans, there's elements of all of that in this trip too, but it probably leans a bit more on the knowledge exchange side of things, hence the title of it as well. So I don't know if the agenda for the trip has been shared with council. We'll make sure that happens, but I'll just sort of give a brief summary of some of the activities that take place there. I'll talk a little bit through some of the organizations and companies involved on the German side of things, and I will sort of end by bringing it back to Strait of Canso and Cape Breton and why, what could be the valuable lessons from this trip at a local level here. So the agenda is a good mixture of different things and meetings and presentations and trips. So some of them are learning about the role of offshore wind in the German energy transition. It's about the regulatory framework in Germany and how they've adjusted that to green energy. It's about policy development on offshore wind as it relates to the green hydrogen production. Obviously, where Germany is quite further ahead than Nova Scotia is in offshore wind, we're kind of more on equal footing when it comes to the production of green fuels. So it's quite interesting. It'll be quite interesting to learn where Germany is with that. They'll be learning about cross-national offshore wind projects and grid connection. So we touched actually upon this in one of the meetings we had in Copenhagen, where there's big offshore grid networks in the North Sea that is shared by the likes of Norway, Denmark, and Germany, and the countries are sharing these grids and that is sorry, the electricity on those grids are from wind farms in all the separate countries. So there's this kind of power sharing agreement. So I imagine that that's what that's about. And the reason why I bring it up here is because it's quite interesting with this proposed New England Maritimes offshore energy corridor that's being talked quite a bit about at the moment. I see a lot of learning from Europe being quite valuable for that initiative here. We're going to be visiting wind farms and wind farm control centers. So it's about learning about how wind farm operations look like. It's about learning about how Germany skilled up their workforce for the offshore wind sector. There'll be a visit of an offshore wind park control center, and I believe there'll also be actually a flyover of an offshore wind farm. So those are just some of the elements and examples of activities that are on this in this agenda. So we'll make sure that that gets shared with everybody if it hasn't been already. Some of the companies and organizations that we'll be meeting with is Siemens, who's a big turbine manufacturer. It's Northland Power Europe, or Northland obviously being a Canadian company, but it'll be this sort of German base of operations, and it's RWE, which is a major German wind farm developer. Then it's the Association of German Offshore Wind Farm Operators. It's Deutsche Windtechnik, which I believe is a supply chain company. And then there'll be a visit, and I'll speak to this in a bit more detail when we talk about the localization benefits of this trip. It's the Cuxhaven Economic Development Agency and the Cuxhaven Offshore Industry Center. So bringing it back to Cape Breton and the Strait of Cancel, why is this trip a good idea? Well, first and foremost, it's about making meaningful connections. Northland Power, Siemens, and RWE, which are the major companies that meetings will take place with, are all likely to be players in offshore wind in Nova Scotia. In fact, Northland Power is already an active player in the wind power industry in Nova Scotia. So again, it's about fostering those relationships. It's about getting these major companies who's been working in this industry for many, many years, their perspective on our infrastructure, on our opportunities, on our challenges. And then I was talking about this place called Cuxhaven, which is just on the sort of North German coast. And having read about it, it sounds a bit like Esbjerg in Denmark. So having read the Wind Europe report from Mayor Brenda, you will have seen that we went to Esbjerg and visited the port facility there. I believe Cuxhaven have quite a similar story to Esbjerg. So going there, we really make us learn from local people on the ground. How did Cuxhaven develop into a center for offshore wind? How did they handle these challenges about back in the day, skilling up the workforce, readying their supply chain? How did they make that transition? What industries were what's current supply chain companies for offshore wind? What industries were they in before? And what steps did they need to take to get there? What are the infrastructure requirements to be? What do you need to be an offshore wind center, such as Cuxhaven and such as Esbjerg, and obviously such as we hope the Strait of Cancel will be as well. Obviously, the trip is touching quite a bit on green hydrogen as well. So green hydrogen production in Germany, how does that relate to Point Tupper? The project themselves, it'll be interesting to hear about what green hydrogen projects are on the go in Germany, but at the same time, it's quite interesting, obviously having seen the media about Everwind and Bear Head in terms of Nova Scotia very much pursuing green hydrogen production for exports, and Germany is the country that often gets mentioned there. What's the interplay there between Germany's thinking on their import of green fuels, but also their own production of green fuels? So I'm really looking forward to hearing about that. Bringing it back to sort of a more local level, Cuxhaven is the example. How is the local community benefiting or being compensated for these major developments, in addition to local job creation? And then it would be really good to go to fact check some of the assumptions that we left Copenhagen with. So it'd be good to bring them to Germany and just try and, okay, is this really the case, what we heard in Copenhagen? So things like, where's the industry headed? We hear a lot about floating wind technology at the moment, but I hear different sides about enough of the pilot projects for wind. We need more standardization and scale up. Whereas other sides will say, no, we need to test more, we need to innovate more. So I'm quite interested to kind of test some of those assumptions. What are the barriers to the supply chain? Is that the same as what we heard at Wind Europe? What are the challenges to workforce development? Are they the same as we heard at Wind Europe? So those are some of my thoughts. Having looked at this sort of agenda, having read it through, but I'm sure there'll be lots of other good stuff in there. But happy to take any questions.
Yeah, and I
Thanks,
think
Mark.
the request, maybe Mayor, you can tell me when we articulate that, but we're happy to take any questions.
Sure. Yeah, I guess just, so it's another opportunity, it's another invitation to go on, to be part of a delegation to Germany to learn more about offshore wind and green hydrogen, as Martin and Tyler have mentioned. There was an invitation for 2 people to attend. Of course, it came forward for consideration. Warden Lumbercat couldn't take one of those invitations. We both thought it would be a great idea, most definitely for Martin to go. And of course, if council would like me to go, I'm happy to make myself available. It is a big commitment at a particularly busy time for my business, but I would make myself available if council thought it was a good idea. But minimum, I think it would be a great idea, at least to definitely send Martin so we can continue to build capacity, expand our knowledge, and understand what the future may look like here in the Strait area. But what role can Port Hawkesbury play? What role can Richmond County play? And Tyler certainly has a little bit more of a fingers on the pulse of the cost. I do know that some of the costs for the delegation will be covered, but there will be some hard costs that won't. So I'll hand things over to Tyler to let us know what that would look like for Martin to attend.
Yeah, our last estimate when we looked at flights, and as everyone knows, sometimes those things change, but our best guess is that the total cost of our portion that we'd be covering from Canada would be about $4,000. And so we expect, what we're proposing is that the Cape Breton Regional Enterprise Network cover half of that, and a quarter each from each participating municipality, with the town of Hawkesbury and Richmond County. That was the same model we used at Wind Europe, and it's a similar model when there's other significant travel in other parts of the Cape Breton Regional Enterprise Network to ensure that, as I said, it's even though this is twice in a pretty short time, these kind of trips are rare. So this is the way we kind of stretch those dollars in those instances.
Okay, well, thank you. I guess, so there is a bit of a time frame. I think they would need to know if either one of us or both of us will be going by. I think they gave us till like Wednesday, so that they can confirm their trip. It is, anyway, it's up to council what you would like to do. Has Richmond already committed to the quarter of the cost for Martin?
Martin, I'll let you turn that over. You were on the pulse on that.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, so what's the thoughts of council?
I would move, Your Worship, that we supply quarter of the cost for Martin and quarter of the cost for yourself. Or is it all cost for yourself?
Well, I will go if council would like me to, but my recommendation would be to at least send Martin, just so we have the
Was there
advantage.
2 that could go? Then?
Yeah, there's 2 that can go. I
It'd
don't-
4,000. It'd be the
Total 4,000?
It would be 4,000, but again,
So you're looking for 5.
it would be 5. If you want me to go, it would be 1,000 if you would prefer that just Martin go.
Yeah, and I think council in the past had a bit of, because like I said, those costs fluctuate. We will work diligently to ensure it stays within that, but I can't 100% guarantee it will be that as I think we looked at the flights about 5 days ago now, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
I do have a question.
Yeah, well, we just have to put a motion
There's
on the
no
floor.
motion on the floor yet.
Yeah.
I will move the 5,000 then, your worship, up to the 5,000.
Okay, thank
I'll
you.
second the motion.
Okay, thank you. So go ahead.
So I do have a question. How long ago did we know about this trip?
I think it was not quite 2 weeks ago, maybe about a,
Yeah,
10
20
days.
Yeah, I'd have
Would
to
that
check
be-
my emails. But yeah, we first started exploring it about 2 weeks ago. Yeah, but it may have come into my inbox earlier than that.
yeah.
So it's more of a comment than a question. This would have been a good topic to bring up at a budget meeting where we just literally passed a budget. I don't want to be the stick in the mud, but we just passed a budget and now we're spending $5,000 that we didn't know we were spending. I do have some concern with that.
My thoughts on my portion of the travel could likely be absorbed in my already existing travel budget. FCM was covered by the NSFM this time around, so I do have some wiggle room in my own budget that probably wouldn't have much of a impact on the cost. But of course, the $1,000 would be, I'm sure could be absorbed somewhere in our travel cost, overall travel budget.
Here's mine.
Question?
Question has been called. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded? Okay, the motion is approved. Thank you for your time, Martin, and thank you, Tyler.
Thank you,
Appreciate that.
Mayor and Council.
Thank you very much.
Our pleasure.
Okay.
NSCC.
Okay, so over to you, Terry, NSCC Heavy Equipment Training Area.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we discussed this last year, and this is coming up again. So NSCC is requesting consideration of lease renewal. So NSCC has leased land on Unity Drive for several years to offer 2 heavy equipment operator programs per year. They're seeking a lease agreement again so they can conduct heavy equipment operator training in 2023-24. They intend to put a small mobile trailer structure to hook up power to better accommodate the program, especially during winter months. To this end, they are seeking a 5-year lease term. So we've had discussions in the past. That council has always been very supportive of this program. However, there'd be concerns if we do have an opportunity for development on Unity Drive that there'd be an out clause. So, and this is a similar consideration Richmond County had. So, any motion would have to contain an out clause should prospects on the land change before the lease is up. So for consideration of the town of Roxbury under a 5-year lease agreement with Nova Scotia Community College for heavy equipment operator program on Unity Drive that will contain a clause should prospects on land change before the lease is up.
I would move the motion.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion that's on the floor?
Yes, Your Worship, through you. This, with the land change, if somebody's interested, is that the whole parcel or just part?
Through you, Your Worship, I think we have to look at that and sort of the commission will have to look at that too. So if we sell a piece of land that doesn't really interfere with the operation, that could be, there would be no issue. If there's sale of a piece of land that does, I guess that's something that would have to consider. So I think I don't think we know, I think until we know what the development opportunity is, we can't really figure that out.
Any follow-up questions?
No, Your Worship.
Okay. Any other discussion or comments?
Question.
Okay, the question has been called. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Contrary minded? Okay, the motion is approved. Is there anything else on that item? Okay, looks good.
No, Your Worship.
Okay, over to you, Councillor McDougall on ball fields.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just on the ball fields, I know there's some work we have to be doing on the ball fields over the next while, and I know that myself, I've been an advocate of fixing the ball field up. I know there's been other council members on council that were also interested in having some work done to the ball fields. So with your permission, Your Worship, I'd like to make a motion. Thank you. I move that our CAO, Terry Doyle, send an email on behalf of council to our MLA, Alan McMaster, asking if he and or his staff could look at ways of funding for lights at the Dan Willie McDonald Ball Field in Port Hawkesbury.
Do we have a second
I
for
will
that
second
motion?
that.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor that has been read. It's got a mover and a seconder. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Your worship, through you to Councilor McDougall, should we also incorporate or include the soccer field as well with respect to the
Well, that is our intent going forward. That was always my intent, but I'm a little leery of asking for too much, and we might not be able to bite off everything this year. I was anticipating doing that next year. I think I'd rather get half is better right now than nothing. And I think if we ask for too much, we're gonna get nothing. That's the impression I'm getting.
Okay, any other comments or questions on the current motion? Did you have any follow-up comments?
No, your worship, no, that's fine.
There are no other
Unless
comments.
you want to make an amendment.
Question, so
Well, I would
Councillor
guess
MacGyver,
Maybe I would. Maybe I'll make an amendment to that we actually, if you would read your motion again, Councilor McDowell.
I move that our CAO, Terry Doyle, send an email on behalf of council to our MLA, Alan McMaster, asking if he and or his staff could look at ways of funding for lights at the Dan Willie McDonald Ball Field in Port Hawkesbury.
So I think an amendment would be fine. It's just asking for the MLA and his staff to look at what possible funding might be available for lighting. And I think to include the soccer field as well. And when that information will come back, then a decision would be made by council and in conjunction with the government as to how we would proceed.
just for clarity, Councillor, you mean lighting for both fields?
Yes.
Correct, okay. Okay, so we have an amendment that has been proposed on the main motion. Do we have a seconder for the amendment?
I'd second the amendment.
Okay, so the amendment has been seconded, so now any discussion on the amendment?
Yes, Your Worship.
Okay, over to you, Councillor.
On the amendment, like I said, we worked on this back in, I think it was 2010. I was looking at some information up in Jason's office the other day, or about a month ago or whatever. And all the conduit, everything is already set up for the lighting for the soccer field. It's already set up there. And actually, I think that we may be able to use the conduit as part of our funding, because from what I was told that could be used. So it might be a good thing, but going back, half of nothing is nothing, but I'd rather get half than nothing.
Your worship,
Okay, go ahead.
just for clarity, the conduit is at what field?
It's connected, it's coming from the baseball field. It goes over into the soccer field.
Okay, so we explored this last year.
Mhm.
There's not the proper phase power for the soccer field right now. We talked about this last year at great length.
Who's we?
At council, we discussed it. Gordy presented it to us. It needs three-phase power brought to the soccer field, which we don't have. And it was almost $1 million, if I'm not mistaken. to get Nova Scotia Power to upgrade and put the lights in at the soccer field. And it was just under 500,000, I believe, for the dam delay.
Okay, well, that's something that we'll have to look at when we, well, like I say, I don't want to lose an opportunity here to get lights for the ball field, but you know, I understand where Councilor Corey is coming from also, but I've been putting some work into this lately.
Is there any other comments or questions on the amendment?
Just one, Your Worship, through you. So this is two separate projects you're looking for?
According to Councilor McDougall, he's looking for us to submit a request to the MLA to have his office look at what possible funding is available, and I'm making an amendment to that. I'm asking, we made a motion for an amendment to also include the soccer field as part of that search, I guess, for funding.
Did that answer your question, Councillor?
Yeah, it's one project.
Okay.
You're asking for money for both fields.
That would be the amendment if it passes.
I-
Okay. Terry, did you have any information you can lend from the staff?
No, I really wasn't certain what the agenda item was, so I wasn't prepared to discuss ball field lighting. I'd certainly be happy to send out the information that we had before, so just so to remind.
It's just that I think everybody knows our position that our MLA is in, and he's deputy premier, he's our representative, he's the minister of finance, blah, blah, blah. If we can't get it now from him, we're not going to get it, in my mind. And I think he needs direction. If we say that this is a project that our council is supporting, I think the chances are there. And my intention was to do part A first, which would be just the ball field, how great that would look, and then part B would be the soccer field. We have not one ball field, hard ball field in Inverness County with lights on it. And it'll bring, I think Councilor Coyne mentioned it before, all the tournaments and ball fields. We come September time, we're playing our playoffs, we can't play after 5:30 because we're dark. And it's okay in the middle of June, the end of June, the early of July to play at 7:30, 8:30 at night, but you're not doing it in September.
So just to add on Deputy Mayor's comment, I'm hearing that a majority, if not all, of our minor soccer games this year for our association will not be played in Port Hawkesbury. It might be nice to find out if that's the case before we go ahead and ask for funding for lighting for games that are not even taking place.
So I guess we'll leave that question with Councilor McCrory just to find out what the scoop is on that. Any other comments or questions on the amendment?
So, yeah, so we're going to vote on the amendment?
First, we have to vote on the
Sure.
amendment before
Okay.
we vote on the main motion. Okay. Do you have
Question?
any comments? Okay.
No, well, the comment is,
Sure.
I understand where Councillor McDougall is coming from. So, although I introduced the amendment, appreciate the comments, and so I'm going to vote against my amendment.
You're not allowed.
Okay?
No. You're not
So we need a
allowed.
parliamentary.
So we do have to.
Well,
we
you got
do
a
have to vote.
parliamentarian right here. You cannot vote. You're not allowed to vote. You're not allowed to vote.
Okay.
I could vote against
You
it.
can
because I
call the
second it.
question.
You can't vote against it.
If you call the question,
Question.
it'll go to a
Question.
vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Contrary minded. Okay, so we're now back to the main motion, left unchanged. So any comments or questions on the main motion?
Question.
Okay, the question has been called. All those in favor, please signify by saying
Aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded. Okay, the motion is approved. And
Thank you, Your Worship.
for you're welcome, and for your benefit, or I guess for all of our benefits, maybe we'll get a little bit more information with regard to the needs of the minor soccer, I guess, community, and look at what the future may hold for any other future funding opportunities through our MLA.
Sure.
Any other items that you need to cover under that?
No, that's fine. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, we'll move on then to municipal affairs funding applications to Terry.
Just for council information, we're applying for tomorrow under two programs. One is a beautification and streetscaping program. That's money up to $25,000. So that's going to center around improvements at the waterfront. And the other one that we are applying for tomorrow is the community works program. We're applying for a total of 6 positions. And 3 of those are with respect to our childcare, summer childcare camp. And 2 for that will help us with the beautification associated with some funding that we put forward on budget for extra help. And the 6th one is directly associated with our waterfront and work that's going to occur there. So it's just it's an information item for council.
Any questions? Okay, so we'll move on then to approved additions, which we can bypass because we do not have any this evening. Future meetings, we have our committee of the whole on June 20th. And typically to be able to ratify any decision-making, since we will be recessing for the summer, it's typically followed by a special public meeting of council directly after the committee of the whole. And then after summer recess, our first public meeting post-summer will be September 5th. And at this time, I would ask if there is anyone from the gallery. We do have some folks joining online. Are there any questions this evening with regard to any of our agenda items? Hearing no questions at this time, I would ask for a motion of adjournment.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Reminded, meeting is adjourned. Thank you everyone for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Have a good summer.